Hi, my name is Nicholas, and at 47 years old, I work as a senior accountant in a mid-sized firm downtown, where the days blend into spreadsheets and conference calls that stretch into the evenings. I've been married to Margaret for 24 years, ever since we met in our early 20s during a community theater production where she played the lead and I handled the lighting. We have 2 grown children, a son in college studying engineering and a daughter who's just started her first job as a graphic designer, both of whom visit sporadically, leaving our suburban home feeling increasingly like an echo chamber of routines we've outgrown. Our life together has settled into a stable rhythm, marked by quiet dinners and weekend errands, but lately, an undercurrent of disconnection has crept in, like the faint draft from a window we forgot to seal, making everything feel just a little colder than it should. The sharp ring of the doorbell pierced the quiet hum of our evening like a sudden crack in a frozen lake, jolting me from the worn leather armchair where I sat nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee, the bitter aroma mingling with the faint scent of rosemary from the roast chicken Margaret had prepared earlier, its juices still cooling on the kitchen counter. I glanced at the clock on the mantel, its brass hands ticking steadily toward 8 o'clock, and wondered who could be calling at this hour on a Tuesday, when the neighborhood usually settled into the soft glow of living room lamps and the distant murmur of televisions filtering through half-open windows. As I rose, my knees protesting with a subtle creak that reminded me of the years accumulating like dust on the bookshelves, I caught sight of Margaret in the hallway mirror, her reflection pausing mid-stride as she smoothed her blouse, a nostalgic floral pattern she'd worn since our early days together, her fingers lingering a moment too long on the fabric as if recalling some distant memory. I opened the door to find our neighbor, Mrs. Ellison, standing there with her usual bundle of mail she'd accidentally received, her wrinkled hands clutching the envelopes like fragile relics, the cool evening air carrying the earthy smell of impending rain from the darkening sky overhead. "Sorry to bother you, Nicholas," she said, her voice quivering slightly with age, her eyes darting past me into the house as if searching for something, a small twitch at the corner of her mouth betraying a hesitation I couldn't quite place. Handing over the stack, she added, "There's one for Margaret from an old address, looks like it's from back in her college days," and as I took it, I noticed the postmark from a town we'd visited only once, years ago on a whim, the ink slightly smudged as if handled with undue care. The arrival of the mysterious letter from Margaret's past serves as the first tangible breach in the couple's fragile trust, symbolizing how unresolved elements from one's history can infiltrate a stable but stagnant marriage. Psychologically, Nicholas's immediate fixation on the envelope reflects cognitive dissonance, a clash between his rational self, who dismisses it as innocuous, and his intuitive emotional radar detecting vulnerability. Margaret's subtle reaction, the lingering glance and quick concealment, indicates denial at play, a defensive mechanism where she compartmentalizes the letter's emotional pull to avoid confronting her dissatisfaction. Interpersonally, this moment underscores the erosion of openness. In long-term relationships, such secrecy fosters isolation rather than intimacy, planting seeds of suspicion that amplify perceived disconnection. The first warning sign was already here, in the way everyday objects like mail become harbingers of hidden narratives, urging partners to address emotional drafts before they chill the entire home. This event highlights the theme of trust's fragility, where small anomalies, if unexamined, snowball into betrayals, compelling Nicholas toward hypervigilance and Margaret deeper into evasion, ultimately straining the interpersonal bond forged over decades. Inside, Margaret emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel that bore faint stains from countless meals, her movements deliberate and unhurried, but there was a subtle shift in her posture, a slight straightening of her shoulders, a fleeting glance toward the mail in my hand that she quickly masked with a smile, her lips curving just enough to reveal the small gap between her front teeth that I'd always found endearing. "Who was that?" she asked, her tone light but laced with an undercurrent of curiosity, as she reached for the envelopes, her fingers brushing mine in a way that felt almost absent, the warmth of her skin contrasting with the chill that had seeped in from outside. I watched as she sifted through them, her eyes lingering on the one Mrs. Ellison had mentioned, a brief flicker of recognition crossing her face before she tucked it into her pocket, the fabric rustling softly like a secret being concealed. That evening, as we sat at the dining table, the overhead light casting long shadows across the oak surface scarred from years of family gatherings, Margaret announced casually over her salad, the crisp lettuce crunching under her fork, that she was planning to meet up with an old friend from her college theater group the following weekend. "Jocelyn called out of the blue," she said, her voice carrying a nostalgic lilt, her gaze drifting to the window where rain had begun to patter against the panes, each drop a tiny percussion that filled the pauses in our conversation. Jocelyn, a name I hadn't heard in years, evoked vague memories of laughter-filled rehearsals and late-night drives home, but something in Margaret's expression, a distant softness in her eyes, a subtle avoidance of direct contact with mine, stirred a quiet unease in my chest, like the first rumble of thunder far off on the horizon. Margaret's announcement of the meetup with Jocelyn, later revealed as a cover, marks a pivotal interpersonal shift, where nostalgia becomes a gateway for emotional infidelity, eroding the foundation of trust in their marriage. Emotionally, Nicholas experiences anticipatory anxiety, a psychological response rooted in attachment theory. His secure base, once Margaret, now feels threatened by external pulls from her past, triggering hyperarousal and rumination. Margaret's evasive gaze and nostalgic tone reveal her own internal conflict, a midlife quest for vitality clashing with marital inertia, employing denial to justify reconnection as harmless. This event exemplifies how betrayal begins subtly, through omissions rather than overt acts, fostering a cycle of withdrawal that amplifies disconnection. A typical mistake is to think that this is just a phase, dismissing red flags as midlife whims. In reality, it signals deeper unmet needs for excitement, compelling the betrayed partner toward suspicion while the betrayer rationalizes secrecy as self-preservation. The consequences here are insidious, planting doubt that poisons daily interactions, and highlighting personal growth's necessity. Nicholas must soon confront whether silence perpetuates stagnation or catalyzes change. As the days unfolded in their predictable pattern, I found myself noticing small anomalies in our routine, the way Margaret's phone would buzz more frequently during dinner, its screen lighting up with notifications she dismissed with a quick swipe, her thumb moving with a practiced efficiency that seemed out of place in our stagnant evenings, or how she'd linger in the bathroom after her showers, the steam clouding the mirror as muffled voices from a call filtered through the door, her laughter emerging in short, forced bursts that didn't quite match the woman I'd known for 2 decades. I told myself it was nothing, the emotional stagnation of our marriage manifesting in my overactive imagination, the routine of balancing ledgers at work bleeding into a need to account for every detail at home. But as I lay in bed that night, the sheets cool against my skin despite the heater's low hum, I couldn't shake the image of that envelope disappearing into her pocket, its contents a mystery that gnawed at the edges of my thoughts like an unspoken question hanging in the air. The next morning, as I poured coffee into my thermos, the rich, nutty scent filling the kitchen where sunlight filtered through the blinds in slanted beams, illuminating specks of dust dancing lazily, Margaret mentioned the outing again, her hands busy packing her lunch with deliberate care, slicing an apple into neat wedges that she arranged in a container, her knife clicking rhythmically against the cutting board. "It'll be good to catch up," she murmured, her eyes not quite meeting mine, a strand of her gray hair falling across her forehead which she brushed away with the back of her hand, leaving a faint trace of apple juice on her skin. I nodded, forcing a smile that felt tight at the corners, my mind replaying the way she'd hesitated when I asked about Jocelyn's recent life, her answer vague and trailing off into silence, broken only by the drip of the faucet she'd promised to fix but never did. As I left for work, the door clicking shut behind me with a finality that echoed in the empty hallway, a nagging doubt settled in my gut, heavy like undigested food, whispering that this reconnection with the past might be unraveling threads I hadn't even known were frayed. The weekend approached with the inexorable slowness of a shadow lengthening across the lawn, each day at the office blurring into the next amid the fluorescent hum of overhead lights and the rhythmic tapping of keyboards, where I balanced columns of numbers that always added up neatly, unlike the intangible imbalances creeping into my home life. Returning one evening, the house greeted me with the familiar scent of lavender from the diffuser Margaret favored, its misty vapors curling in the air like unspoken words, but as I hung my coat on the rack, its wooden pegs worn smooth from years of use, I noticed her purse on the hall table, unzipped just enough for her phone to peek out, its screen dark but somehow accusatory in its stillness. She was in the living room, curled on the sofa with a book in her lap, the pages yellowed from age, her fingers tracing the lines absent-mindedly, but when I entered, she startled slightly, her body tensing like a coiled spring before relaxing into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, the corners crinkling in a way that felt rehearsed. Over dinner that night, the clink of silverware against plates punctuating the quiet, Margaret's phone vibrated on the counter, a persistent buzz that cut through the steam rising from the pasta, its sauce rich with garlic and tomatoes she'd simmered all afternoon, the aroma heavy and comforting yet unable to dispel the growing chill in the room. She glanced at it, fork pausing midway to her mouth, a droplet of sauce hovering precariously before she set it down, her chair scraping against the tile floor as she rose with a murmured, "Just a second," her steps light but hurried, the hem of her skirt brushing the cabinets as she picked up the device and retreated to the hallway, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried fragments of laughter and familiarity back to me. I sat there, the food cooling on my plate, my appetite waning as I strained to hear, the words indistinct but the tone intimate, evoking a pang in my chest like a muscle pulled from disuse, my mind racing through rationalizations. Perhaps it was Jocelyn finalizing plans, or a family member checking in, but the way she angled her body away from the doorway, her free hand gesturing animatedly in the empty air, planted seeds of doubt that took root in the fertile soil of our emotional distance. The secret of phone calls and Margaret's evasive responses during intimate moments like dinner exemplify the interpersonal corrosion of betrayal's early stages, where digital intimacy supplants shared vulnerability. Psychologically, Nicholas grapples with betrayal blindness, a common denial mechanism where he rationalizes anomalies to preserve the marital ideal, yet his somatic responses, waning appetite, chest pangs, signal escalating anxiety, rooted in evolutionary fears of abandonment. Margaret's hurried retreats and forced laughter indicate compartmentalization, a coping strategy that allows her to nurture the affair's thrill while minimizing guilt, but it deepens the emotional chasm. This accumulation of small evidence illustrates trust's transactional nature. Each unchecked secrecy withdraws deposits from the relational bank, fostering resentment and isolation. Many people choose to remain silent at this point, and in vain, as unvoiced suspicions breed resentment, preventing honest dialogue that could salvage or redefine the bond. The theme of denial here is dual-edged. Nicholas denies his intuition to avoid pain, while Margaret denies the affair's impact, highlighting how such patterns perpetuate cycles of disconnection, ultimately demanding confrontation for any hope of growth or severance. In the days that followed, these small mysteries accumulated like unread messages in an inbox. One afternoon, as I worked from home, the study filled with the soft glow of my computer screen reflecting off the polished desk cluttered with sticky notes and pens, I heard the front door open unexpectedly, Margaret's keys jingling in the lock with a haste that suggested urgency, her footsteps padding quickly up the stairs before I could call out. Curiosity tugged at me, but I remained seated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, the cursor blinking accusingly as minutes stretched into an hour, until she descended, her hair slightly disheveled as if she'd been napping, though her eyes held a brightness that contradicted rest, and when I asked about her early return from errands, she waved it off with a vague, "Traffic was lighter than expected," her hands busying themselves with folding laundry from the basket, the fabric snapping crisply but her gaze avoiding mine, a subtle flush creeping up her neck that she hid by turning toward the window, where sunlight dappled the curtains in patterns that shifted like unspoken lies. My internal world churned with a tumult of emotions, hope flickering like a candle in a drafty room, only to be overshadowed by worry that gnawed at the edges of my thoughts during commutes, the car's engine humming steadily while rain streaked the windshield, blurring the world outside into abstract shapes that mirrored my confusion. I found myself replaying moments from our past, lazy Sundays in bed, her head on my shoulder, the scent of her shampoo mingling with fresh coffee, but now they felt tainted, as if viewed through a lens smudged with fingerprints, and frustration built like pressure in a sealed pot, bubbling up in quiet moments when I'd catch her staring at her phone, her thumbs scrolling through screens with a focus that excluded me, her lips parting slightly in silent reactions, a soft intake of breath that spoke volumes in its privacy. Anger simmered beneath the surface, not explosive but a slow burn, directed as much at myself for doubting as at her for the secrecy, my heart racing in the quiet nights when she'd retire early, claiming fatigue, her side of the bed cooling before I joined, the sheets rumpled in ways that suggested restless turning. One evening, As twilight cast a purple hue over the backyard, the leaves rustling in a gentle breeze that carried the neighbor's barbecue smoke, I overheard a snippet of a call while passing the bedroom door, Margaret's voice low and nostalgic, saying, "It's been so long since we talked like this," followed by a pause filled with her soft chuckle, her hand lightly covering the mouthpiece as she listened, her posture relaxed against the headboard, legs drawn up casually. The words hung in the air like smoke, fueling my suspicion that this reconnection with past contacts was more than platonic reminiscence, a bridge to something, or someone, that pulled her away from our stagnant routine. And as I retreated to the kitchen, the cold tile under my feet grounding me, a knot of distrust tightened in my stomach, leaving me to wonder if the emotional withdrawal I'd attributed to time was instead a deliberate retreat into hidden territories. The decision to investigate crept upon me like dawn's first light filtering through the blinds, soft at first but insistent, as I sat in the study one afternoon, the room heavy with the scent of old books and the faint metallic tang of my laptop's fan whirring overtime, my fingers drumming idly on the desk while Margaret was out, running errands, her car backing out of the driveway with a gravelly crunch that echoed her evasive explanations. Moral qualms twisted in my gut, a cocktail of guilt and necessity, as I recalled the envelope she'd pocketed days ago, now likely tucked away in her nightstand drawer, its contents a potential key to the puzzle of her withdrawn demeanor, and with a deep breath that filled my lungs with the stale air of indecision, I rose, my chair rolling back with a muffled thud against the carpet, and made my way upstairs, each step creaking under my weight like a confession of intrusion. The bedroom was bathed in muted afternoon light, dust motes swirling lazily in the beams that slanted across the unmade bed, the sheets still bearing the imprint of her body from the morning, a faint trace of her perfume, vanilla and sandalwood, lingering like a ghost of intimacy long faded. I approached her nightstand, the wooden surface cluttered with a half-read novel, its pages dog-eared, and a glass of water with lipstick smudges on the rim, my hand hesitating before pulling open the drawer, the brass handle cool and smooth against my palm, revealing a jumble of receipts, jewelry, and there, at the bottom, the envelope, its seal broken, the paper crinkled as if read multiple times. Pulling it out, my pulse quickening to a staccato rhythm that thrummed in my ears, I unfolded the letter inside, the handwriting elegant and looping, from someone named Eric, a name that stirred vague recollections of her college circle, the words expressing delight at reconnecting via email after all these years, hinting at shared memories that made my stomach clench, though nothing overtly damning, just enough to fuel the fire of suspicion burning low in my chest. Emboldened by this small breach, I turned to her laptop on the dresser, its lid closed like a secret keeper, and with trembling fingers that betrayed my inner turmoil, anger at her secrecy warring with fear of what I'd find, I opened it, the screen flickering to life with a soft chime that seemed deafening in the silent room, prompting for a password I knew from years of shared devices. Navigating to her email, the inbox loading with a whirl of icons, I scrolled through recent messages, my eyes scanning subject lines that blurred together until one chain caught my attention, exchanges with Eric, starting innocently with nostalgic anecdotes but evolving into more personal confessions, her words typed with an emotional openness she hadn't shown me in months, complaining of our routine stagnation in ways that pierced like shards of glass, his responses empathetic and flirtatious, suggesting meetings that aligned suspiciously with her upcoming outing. Nicholas's invasion of privacy, snooping through the envelope and emails, represents a desperate bid for agency amid eroding trust, psychologically manifesting as a shift from passive suspicion to active betrayal of boundaries, mirroring Margaret's own transgressions. Emotionally, this act intensifies his internal conflict, blending righteous indignation with profound guilt, a classic ambivalence in betrayal trauma that can lead to self-doubt and eroded self-esteem. Interpersonally, it accelerates the relationship's collapse by violating the very trust he seeks to restore, underscoring how mutual secrecy creates a toxic reciprocity. The email's revelations expose Margaret's denial fracturing under her confessions of stagnation, revealing midlife identity crises where external validation supplants spousal intimacy. This moment's consequences are dual: it validates Nicholas's fears, catalyzing resolve, yet risks entrenching victimhood if not channeled into growth. Many people choose to remain silent at this point, and in vain. Instead, this, a moment of truth, demands ethical reckoning, highlighting personal growth through boundary setting, as Nicholas begins transforming pain into empowerment, though at the cost of irreparable relational fractures. Setbacks came swiftly, as if the universe conspired to muddy the waters, a red herring in the form of an email from Jocelyn confirming the social event, detailing innocent plans for drinks and reminiscing, which momentarily doused my suspicions, making me question my paranoia as I closed the laptop with a click, my hands slick with sweat that left faint prints on the surface. But doubt resurfaced that evening, when Margaret returned home, her cheeks flushed from the wind outside, carrying shopping bags that rustled with new clothes, items more vibrant than her usual wardrobe, a silk blouse in deep crimson that she modeled briefly, twirling with a self-conscious laugh, her eyes seeking approval but darting away when I asked about her day, her answer clipped and evasive, the scent of unfamiliar cologne clinging faintly to her hair, which she attributed to a crowded store. The moral dilemma gnawed at me through sleepless nights, the bedroom clock ticking relentlessly as I lay staring at the ceiling's textured patterns, shadows playing tricks like my mind's rationalizations, torn between preserving trust and uncovering truth, my breaths shallow and uneven. Determination grew, however, during a lunch break at work, the cafeteria buzzing with colleagues' chatter and the clatter of trays. When I discreetly checked public social media on my phone, the screen's glow illuminating my face in the dim corner booth, discovering Eric's profile, a 48-year-old architect, photos showing a life of travel and charisma that contrasted our suburban stasis, and mutual connections with Margaret's old theater friends, including recent likes on her posts that she'd hidden from our shared feeds. The cliffhanger arrived late one night, rain lashing the windows in sheets that distorted the streetlights outside. As I sat alone in the living room, the television's murmur a backdrop to my scrolling through old emails on my own device, accidentally stumbling upon a forwarded message from years ago that linked to an archived folder, old emails from Margaret's account she'd once shared during a family tech mishap, now revealing a rekindled correspondence with Eric that predated the letter. Intimate in tone and laced with plans for a discreet meeting, my heart pounding like a drum in the tense silence, the phone's dim light casting eerie shadows on my hands that trembled with a mix of pain and resolve. The undeniable proof materialized on the night of her supposed outing, the house enveloped in a hush broken only by the distant rumble of thunder rolling in from the west, the air thick with the ozone scent of approaching storm as I paced the kitchen, the tile cold under my bare feet, my mind a whirlwind of fragmented thoughts, images of those emails flashing like lightning, Eric's words entwining with Margaret's in digital intimacy that mocked our physical proximity. She'd left earlier that evening, dressed in the new crimson blouse that hugged her figure with unfamiliar allure, her perfume applied more generously than usual, its sweet notes trailing her as she kissed my cheek goodbye, her lips cool and brief, her eyes avoiding mine with a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, that I now recognized in hindsight, the door closing behind her with a soft latch that echoed like a finality. Unable to contain the storm within, I drove to the bar she'd mentioned, the wipers swishing rhythmically against the rain-smeared windshield, my knuckles white on the steering wheel as streetlights blurred into streaks of gold and red, my breath fogging the glass in shallow bursts. Parking across the street, the engine ticking as it cooled, I watched through the downpour, the bar's neon sign flickering invitingly, figures moving inside like shadows in a play, until I spotted her through the window, not with Jocelyn but seated intimately with a man matching Eric's profile, tall, silver-streaked hair, his hand gesturing animatedly as she laughed, her head thrown back in a way I hadn't seen in years, their table lit by a single candle that danced in the draft, casting warm glows on their faces flushed with wine and conversation. Heart hammering like a caged animal against my ribs, I entered the bar, the door swinging open with a bell's jingle that cut through the low hum of chatter and clinking glasses, the air heavy with the mingle of alcohol, fried food, and damp coats, my shoes squeaking on the wooden floor as I approached their table, time slowing to a crawl, each step heavy with the weight of betrayal. Margaret's eyes widened in shock as she saw me, her wine glass pausing mid-lift, a droplet spilling onto the tablecloth like blood, her face paling under the dim lights, while Eric straightened, his smile fading into a mask of confusion, his hand withdrawing from where it had rested near hers on the tabletop, a subtle retreat that spoke volumes. The confrontation at the bar crystallizes the consequences of betrayal, transforming latent suspicions into visceral interpersonal rupture, where shock and denial collide in a public arena that amplifies vulnerability. Psychologically, Nicholas's impulsive pursuit reflects a fight response in betrayal trauma, overriding moral qualms with a primal need for validation, yet his controlled demeanor indicates emerging emotional regulation, a marker of resilience. Margaret's gaslighting and tearful deflection reveal cognitive dissonance peaking. Her guilt manifests as deflection, a defense against shame that erodes authenticity. Eric's feigned innocence adds a triangulated dynamic, exacerbating Nicholas's humiliation. This exposure theme underscores betrayal's ripple effects. Beyond the couple, it shatters illusions of security, forcing reckoning with personal agency. The first warning sign was already here, in the candlelit intimacy Nicholas witnesses, a visual metaphor for the warmth absent at home. Many overlook such escalations as just emotional, but they demand immediate boundaries to mitigate deeper wounds, paving the way for growth through painful clarity rather than prolonged deception. "Nicholas," she whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice, setting the glass down with a tremble that rippled the liquid inside, her chair scraping back slightly as if preparing to flee, her eyes darting between me and Eric, a flush creeping up her neck that clashed with her blouse. "What are you doing here?" The words hung in the air, laced with accusation rather than apology, her fingers twisting the napkin in her lap, shreds of paper falling like confetti of deceit, while I stood there, rain dripping from my coat onto the floor in rhythmic plops, my composure a fragile veneer over the rage boiling beneath, my fists clenching at my sides, nails digging into palms to anchor myself. Eric rose slowly, his movements deliberate, like a man navigating a minefield, extending a hand in greeting that I ignored, his cologne, spicy and assertive, wafting toward me, the same scent I'd detected on her hair days ago, his face a study in feigned innocence, brows furrowed in polite concern. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his tone measured, but there was a tension in his jaw, a micro-twitch that betrayed unease, as Margaret interjected with excuses tumbling out in a rush. "This is just an old friend, we were catching up, Jocelyn couldn't make it," her words faltering under my steady gaze, her hands gesturing vaguely, palms up in supplication, tears welling in her eyes that she blinked away furiously, the candle's flame reflecting in them like captured fire. The confrontation escalated in hushed tones to avoid drawing eyes from nearby patrons, my voice low but edged with steel as I recounted the emails I'd found, each revelation landing like a blow, her denials weakening into admissions laced with gaslighting. "You're overreacting, it's just talk," her body language shifting from defensive crossed arms to slumped shoulders, a quiet sigh escaping her lips that carried the weight of resignation. An unexpected twist pierced the moment. Eric confessed they'd reconnected months ago through a mutual friend's funeral, not innocently but with intent, revealing Margaret's nostalgia had masked deeper dissatisfaction, a secret that shattered the remnants of my illusion, pain lancing through me like lightning, yet I maintained control, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, understanding in that charged silence, amid the storm's crescendo outside, that I could only steer my own path forward. In the aftermath, the house felt like a hollow shell, the walls echoing with the absence of her presence as Margaret packed a suitcase the next morning, her movements mechanical and subdued, the zipper's rasp cutting through the heavy silence, sunlight streaming through the windows in harsh beams that highlighted the dust settling on surfaces we'd once polished together. She avoided my eyes, her hands folding clothes with deliberate folds, each item a relic of shared years now tainted, her shoulders hunched under the weight of consequences, while I stood in the doorway, arms crossed over my chest to contain the ache within, the scent of her lingering perfume mingling with the fresh brew of coffee I'd made out of habit, its bitterness mirroring the knot in my throat. Family ripples extended outward. Our son called from college, his voice tinny over the phone, shock giving way to quiet support as I explained in measured tones, the line crackling with pauses filled by his hesitant breaths, while our daughter arrived unannounced, her embrace tight and wordless, her eyes searching mine for reassurance amid the upheaval, the living room couch sagging under our weight as we talked late into the night, the lamp's warm glow casting shadows that danced like unresolved questions. Legalities loomed, divorce papers drafted in sterile offices where the air smelled of ink and polished wood, financial disentanglements discussed with accountants whose detached efficiency contrasted my inner turmoil, small victories in equitable splits offset by setbacks like disputed assets that prolonged the pain, each email from lawyers a reminder of the fracture. Inner conflicts raged like tempests, nights when doubt assailed me, lying in the too large bed, sheets cool and unrumpled on her side, questioning if I'd overreacted, moral dilemmas twisting, forgiveness versus self-respect, until clarity emerged in quiet moments, like watching dawn break over the backyard, the sky lightening from indigo to rose, birdsong piercing the hush, symbolizing renewal. I chose separation, informing Margaret over a neutral coffee shop meeting, the espresso's steam rising between us like a barrier, her reaction muted, tears streaked silently down her cheeks, her hands clasped tightly around her mug, knuckles white, but without conflict, our words sparse and poignant, emphasizing boundaries, no reconciliation, just mutual release. The separation decision encapsulates personal growth amid betrayal's aftermath, where Nicholas transitions from victimhood to agency, psychologically embodying post-traumatic growth, reframing pain as catalyst for self-redefinition. Emotionally, his lingering doubts reflect grief stages, oscillating between anger and bargaining, yet dawn's symbolism signals acceptance, fostering resilience through reclaimed routines like runs, which release endorphins and rebuild self-efficacy. Interpersonally, the muted farewell with Margaret highlights mutual exhaustion, her tears acknowledging consequences without remorse, underscoring betrayal's legacy, fractured families, as children's support navigates loyalty binds. Legal tangles amplify themes of control's illusion, yet equitable resolutions affirm fairness over vengeance. A typical mistake is to think that this is just a phase. In truth, such upheavals demand intentional healing, preventing cycles of distrust in future bonds. This event's conclusions reveal growth's nonlinearity. Relief emerges gradually, transforming stagnation into freedom, as Nicholas's boundaries honor self-respect, modeling healthy severance over toxic reconciliation. Relief washed over me gradually, like warm water easing tense muscles, my body relaxing as I reclaimed routines, morning runs where dew-kissed grass squelched underfoot, the air crisp and invigorating, heart rate steadying to a rhythm of independence. Confidence built through small acts, joining a book club where laughter filled the air unforced, new friends' conversations sparking interests dormant in marriage's stagnation, the weight lifting from my shoulders with each step away from the past, preparing for resolution with a sense of control reclaimed, the door to our shared life closing with a gentle click, not slammed but shut firmly, allowing fresh air to rush in. Across the narrative, themes of trust's erosion, denial's deception, betrayal's profound consequences, and emergent personal growth weave a tapestry of midlife marital dissolution, revealing the psyche's resilience amid relational apocalypse. Nicholas's arc from intuitive unease to empowered separation illustrates betrayal trauma's trajectory. Initial hypervigilance yields to investigative breaches, explosive confrontation, and eventual individuation, psychologically aligning with Kubler-Ross's grief model adapted for relational loss. Margaret's denial, compartmentalizing nostalgia into infidelity, exemplifies avoidance coping, whose interpersonal fallout ripples through family, legal strife underscoring betrayal's tangible toll. Yet, the story's redemptive core lies in growth. Nicholas's routines symbolize autonomy's balm, countering stagnation's paralysis. Ultimately, this tale cautions against silence's vain comfort, affirming that confronting shadows, however storm-swept, ushers renewal, transforming victims into architects of liberated lives, where trust rebuilds inwardly first.